back, y'all. Yeah. Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Healed Soul podcast, where faith meets mental health and healing becomes a lifestyle. And I am your host, Elder Ellasin Allen, a licensed professional counselor, a speaker, a kingdom builder. And I know that God has called me to be the bridge between mental health and the church. Because, like I always say, the church is not always talking about mental health, and mental health is not always talking about Jesus. Amen. So I just wanted to say here on the Healed Soul podcast, we don't just talk about healing, we walk it out. That's important. We deal with the hard truths and the hidden wounds and the real life challenges so that you can live whole, live free, and live healed. So let's get into today's conversation. So this is going to be one of 5 episodes. And on this episode, I briefly put on my social media a little glimpse of what I was going to be talking about, but this is going to be the extent of everything. And today's episode is when love meets mental health. That's deep, y'all, because not a lot of people are talking about that stuff, right? And if I can be honest, living with someone with mental health can be challenging. It can really be challenging. And sometimes we don't want to talk about it to other people because we don't want to put our relationship or our partner on there, right? And like I say often, we celebrate love, we talk of marriages, we talk about love, we talk about the importance of being committed, right? We talk about all the things, but we don't always talk about what happens when love meets anxiety, or when our loved one has depression, or when our loved one has some kind of other diagnosis, right? We often say for better, for worse, but sometimes that can be a little difficult when you actually have to live through for better or worse. And it's not always a mental health illness. Sometimes it could be a medical illness. I don't know, but it does become a little hard when for better or worse, and it feels like we've been living out worse. So let's go ahead and get into my points that I want to give you guys, talk more about it. Y'all leave me some comments on what your thoughts are. And then also leave me some topics on what you would like for me to discuss, right? So the truth of the matter is you can love somebody deeply and still feel overwhelmed at the same time. And that leads me to my first point, which is love and strain can coexist. And from a psychological perspective, one of the first things we have to normalize is this. 2 things can be true at the same time. I've said that often. You can love your spouse and feel exhausted. You can be committed, right? And feel confused. You can care with everything you have and still feel the emotional weight of what it is that they are carrying. And if not careful, we start judging ourselves for what we feel. Now we're judging ourselves, right? So we say things like, excuse me, if I really loved them, this wouldn't be so hard. If I was stronger, I can handle this better. No, no, and no. That is so far from the truth. You are not weak. You are not weak because you have a moment. You are not weak because you feel like I don't have the capacity for this. You are not weak. You're human. We're all human, which that brings me to my second point. You are not marrying just the person, but you have to understand that you are also marrying the process, right? When mental health is involved, you're not just in a relationship with the person, you're in a relationship with a process. And what that process consists of is a healing process. They're going to have some triggers at time, and we never know when a trigger happens. A smell could be a trigger, a sound could be a trigger, anything could be a trigger, right? Then you're going to have the progress and the setbacks. 1 foot forward, 1 step back. You're going to have some good days and you're going to have some hard days. These are all things that you're going to go through. And what makes it difficult is you didn't always sign up knowing what the process would look like. right? Sometimes we didn't know our partner had a mental health issue. Maybe they didn't know it either, or it was hidden, or whatever the case may be. But we didn't sign up for that, right? But here we are. So this is why I say you have to give yourself some grace and your mercy. And sometimes there's a silent grief that we have. Grief for what you thought marriage would be. Grieve for what you thought marriage would be. You thought about the big wedding, you thought about the kids, the picket fence, the dog, you thought about all of that, building life together, vacations, all the things. But then we have a mental health issue in the way, right? So we have that grief for what feels unpredictable, grief for the emotional connection you wish was easier, because it's not always easy to emotionally connect with someone who has a mental illness, which brings me to my third point. The emotional burden on the supporting spouse, right? Sometimes the supporting spouse takes on this emotional burden. And a lot of times we take this on and we're silent about it. We don't clarify what we feel, how we need, because we don't want to put no more stress, right? So let's talk about something that gets overlooked. Excuse me. The mental health of the one who is supporting. That's what gets overlooked. You, the supporting partner. You're the one that's getting overlooked. And when you're consistently or constantly checking on them, and when you're constantly managing emotional environments, adjusting to their needs, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, you can slowly start to lose yourself without even realizing it. Without even realizing it. And then what happens is you move from being a partner to feeling like a caretaker. And that's the shift. If not addressed, it can create resentment, burnout, right? Emotional distance. I just don't want to be here no more. I'm just here as a caretaker, right? That's the thing that people don't talk about, right? So I also want to just say this. You cannot internalize what is not yours. Sometimes we struggle because we're trying to figure out somebody else's understanding, and we can't. We barely can understand what's going on in our own mind. We're trying to get our thoughts together. So don't always try to figure out somebody else's understanding, right? So this is where we bring in both psychological and spiritual truth, because you have to have two, in my opinion, right? Because you cannot internalize what does not belong to you. You just can't. Just because your spouse is struggling doesn't mean you have to become overwhelmed. Just because they're anxious doesn't mean you have to live in anxiety. And just because they are in a low place for that moment does not mean you have to lose your stability, right? So, okay, I said a lot. I said a lot. I said that you don't have to do this and you don't have to do that just because you're dealing with a partner that has mental illness. So, what do you do? So, I'm glad you asked, right? So, what you want to do is allow yourself to be a supportive partner by learning emotional differentiation. You have to learn that, right? There's emotions that are theirs, your emotions are yours, right? Don't take on their emotions. Be a supportive partner, develop a level of understanding, but their emotions is their emotions and your emotions is your emotions, and they're both valid, right? Ask yourself, what am I feeling and what am I absorbing? Sometimes we just have to stop a minute and be like, hold on, what am I feeling right now? What am I absorbing right now? How can I be supportive if I don't even know what's going on within me? Right? You got to stop over functioning. You are not responsible for fixing everything. You are not responsible. You're not Bob the Builder. You can't fix everything. If they can tell you, ask them, how can I support you during this time? right? And sometimes support may look like encouraging them to go to therapy, being a little bit more present, showing some compassion, because sometimes it's hard. We start feeling like a caretaker. We detach emotionally. We're not compassionate, which triggers more of the mental health issues, right? Those are some of the things that you can do. But what not to do is not to carry their entire emotional load. You can't carry their load, it's not yours. Because if you're trying to carry their entire emotional load, you are neglecting your own needs, right? You have to check in with yourself daily. How are you today? How are you feeling today? Do I have the capacity for it today? Right? And sometimes you got to ask yourself before you pour into them, where am I mentally? Where am I emotionally? You have to understand that. If you don't know where you are, how can you really be supportive of someone else? That's so important, right? And this is where I say, I believe that when we have a marriage, mental health, or just life, we got to have God. And you, this is my opinion, right? You don't have to agree with it if you don't want to, but I know for me and the things I went through, I had to anchor myself in God. And I would suggest this is where you anchor yourself, because he will give us the strength that we don't even have. And I say that because even in Second Timothy 1:7, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind, right? A sound mind means a whole lot. It means I can love you and still think clearly. I can support you and still be stable. I can be present and still be at peace. That's what that means. A sound mind, right? So let me speak to you for a moment. If you feel like you have jumped into a caretaker role and not the partner, you are not failing because this is hard. You're not. You are not weak because you feel the weight of what's happening. You are not wrong for needing space, clarity, and support. You're not. It's okay to take your space. It really is okay. And to get a support system, it just is. Love doesn't mean you have to lose yourself. Commitment doesn't mean self abandonment. Y'all listening? And just because they are in a storm, that doesn't mean that you were called to drown in it. Amen. So I want you to sit with this question. Excuse me. I want you to sit with this question. Where have I been losing myself while trying to love someone else? Where have I been losing myself while trying to love someone else? So, y'all sit with that, ponder that, and tune in for more on marriage and mental health. Tune in for more nuggets, because on our next podcast, we will be discussing support versus self-sacrifice. Amen. So thank you for joining me on the Healed Soul podcast. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who needs it. And remember, healing is not just something you hope for, it's something you walk in one day at a time. Amen. Until next time, live whole, live free, and live healed. God bless.